At the end of part 1, Bong Hwan, who is stuck in Queen Cheoljong's body, tries hard to get back to his time by filling a lake that he thinks is the key to returning home. But things don't go as planned, and the lake dries up, leaving him trapped in the past. After a tense meeting with the Grand Empress Dowager and Kim Jwa Geun, Bong Hwan understands that the only way to stay safe is to apologize and accept his new life as a queen, even though it means giving up his dream of going back to his real world. The next day, in Wajen's room, the king thought about Cheoljong's confession. He realized that his belief that Cheoljong was trying to frame Wajen was completely wrong. In fact, Cheoljong had defended her. The king then remembered the moment before Cheoljong jumped into the lake after she had confessed her feelings to him, but he responded coldly. The king believed that Cheoljong attempted the unthinkable because of her rejected love. However, Prince Young Pyong suggested that maybe the queen's actions were just part of a plan to get the king's attention. Wanting to be sure, the king decided to visit the queen. In her room, Bong Hwan felt frustrated because for the next 15 days, he would have to act like a proper queen to regain the Grand Empress Dowager's trust. He blamed Cheoljong for rejecting Cheoljong's love, which led to her jumping into the lake and causing the soul swap. To make things worse, earlier that day, Bong Hwan had impulsively defended Wajen, and now he was worried he might be stuck in this body forever. As Bong Hwan was venting his anger, the king arrived, which made Bong Hwan start grumbling even more. Furious, Bong Hwan threw a hairpin, which ended up sticking into the wall, surprising the king and the maids. The queen's behavior left the king confused. He later went to the lake and asked why it was being refilled with water. The eunuch explained that Queen Cheoljong had begged the Grand Empress Dowager to fill it again. Then, the king began to suspect that the queen might try to do something unexpected, like jumping into the lake again. Meanwhile, Byong-in met with Kim Jwa Geun and requested the position of Chief Minister of Justice. Deep down, Byong-in wanted to find out who had attacked the queen that night. The next day, the king approved Byong-in's request for the position. Elsewhere, Bong Hwan, who was being punished, spent his time in the royal kitchen sewing. He was making a special food cover to keep the meals warm while being carried. Bong Hwan then cooked again for the Grand Empress Dowager, with a dish that was crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. Of course, the Grand Empress Dowager loved it, and Bong Hwan felt proud of himself. Meanwhile, gossip about Queen Cheoljong's intention to do something drastic spread quickly around the palace. The Punjiang-jo clan took advantage of this and started a petition to have Cheoljong removed from her position as queen. And Wajen, who was about to start painting, felt sad thinking about her maid, Oul, who was injured. But Prince Young Pyong arrived to keep her company, and it became clear that the prince secretly had feelings for Wajen. After finishing her painting, Wajen visited Queen Dowager Jo in her chambers. Queen Dowager Jo told her that the former king, who was her husband, had been poisoned because he tried to stand up against the Anong Kim clan. She warned Wajen to be careful and shared that the Punjiang-jo clan was planning to submit a petition to remove Queen Cheoljong. Queen Dowager Jo then asked Wajen's father, who had great influence, to support this petition. The scene flashes back to that night. Wajen was standing by the lake, waiting for the king, but suddenly Cheoljong appeared and told Wajen that she wouldn't be able to meet him. There, Cheoljong accused Wajen of changing something important. Cheoljong knew that Wajen was hiding a secret, and if the king found out, Wajen would become someone Cheoljong hated. But there, Wajen didn't back down and threatened to tell Cheoljong that Cheoljong planned to harm him. Cheoljong's threat didn't work, and in frustration, she swore that Wajen would lose the person she loved. Then, Cheoljong threw herself into the lake. Wajen, shocked, ran away from the scene. In his room, the king, while reading, remembered Cheoljong's intense anger the night before. From the way she acted, like throwing her hairpin, it was clear she was truly furious and not just trying to get attention. Soon, heavy rain began to fall. On the other hand, Bong Hwan, who was relaxing in the palace kitchen, was thrilled because the rain would naturally fill the lake. He happily went out into the rain, getting soaked, while the maid panicked and tried to protect him. And the king, passing by, was surprised to see the queen dancing in the rain and thought she looked beautiful. He started to feel curious about the real Cheoljong. Soon after, Bong Hwan, busy dancing in the rain, noticed the king staring at him. Feeling joyful, he invited the king to join. The king walked over, apologized, and told the queen to take shelter. But Bong Hwan, celebrating the lake being filled with water, insisted on staying in the rain. Bong Hwan told the king that this would be the last day acting like this, because tomorrow, everything would return to normal. Bong Hwan was planning to leave that era by jumping into the lake, smiling. The king, confused but intrigued, finally left the queen to enjoy the rain. The long-awaited day finally arrived. Bong Hwan quietly whispered to the two maid who were sleeping outside his room. To Hong Yun, he reminded her to tell her descendants to buy land in Gangnam. To Choi, Bong Hwan expressed his gratitude. Before jumping into the lake, Bong Hwan carved a message on a stone. Without hesitation, he then jumped into the lake. As he was sinking, someone in the distance was seen swimming toward him to save him. A few hours before, that morning, the heavy rain had stopped. Cheoljong was in a meeting with Hong, but he couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting to So-young, whose behavior had been strange and very different from the So-young he used to know. Cheoljong found himself intrigued by this new So-young, almost as if she were an alien from another world. He remembered So-young's words during the rain, when she said that after today, everything would go back to normal. Suddenly, Cheoljong stood up in a panic and rushed out. The heavy rain meant the lake was now filled with water. He remembered one of King's men telling him how the queen had begged the Grand Empress Dowager to refill the lake. Now, the lake was surely full, and Cheoljong feared that the queen would try to jump into the lake again. Turns out, the king's suspicion was correct cause he found the queen's clothes, hairpin, and a message carved on a stone by the lake. Upon seeing that, Cheoljong quickly jumped into the lake and saw So-young floating. Despite her resistance, he insisted on saving her, dragging her to the shore. At that time, Bong Hwan was furious because his attempt to return to the modern world had been ruined by the king. However, the king became angry too, thinking So-young was trying to do something drastic again. They started arguing, but before Bong Hwan could explain, Choi and Hong Yun arrived and rushed the queen back to her room. Bong Hwan lied to Choi, saying he just wanted to swim in the lake that morning. Meanwhile, Byung-in was getting ready for his first day as Chief Minister of Justice. Determined, he planned to use his new power to find the person who attacked So-young that night. Elsewhere, Oh-woo, still not fully recovered, was sneaking out of the palace, carrying a charm given to her by Wajen. According to palace rules, non-royal individuals who were injured couldn't stay inside the palace. Unfortunately, Oh-woo ran into Jwa Geun's men, and that day ended up being her last. It turns out that there's a spy made in Do-jong John Hall. She secretly reports to the ministers of the Punjiang-jo clan, and this time, she's been watching So-young, who had just jumped into the lake again. Following Jwa Geun's orders, the spy maid is supposed to report everything she knows about the queen and the king jumping into the lake together. In exchange, she would be promoted and given responsibility over the queen's room. Meanwhile, Wajen, feeling lonely, was visited by Queen Dowager Jo, who brought her a set of arrows as a gift. However, the real gift was the news about a petition sent to the Punjiang-jo clan to impeach Queen So-young. In his room, Bong Hwan started thinking, if he couldn't return through the lake, then how could he go back? He remembered the time when both he and So-young almost drowned. Maybe they needed to be on the edge of death again to switch their souls back. A chill ran down Bong Hwan's spine. He feared that if he tried something extreme, he might actually die. So, Bong Hwan decided to try to understand So-young's soul. He remembered the red cloth So-young had sewn, which turned out to be a farewell letter. Bong Hwan was shocked, realizing that So-young might not have wanted to live in this time period. After their souls were swapped, maybe So-young had run away and didn't want to come back. Feeling even more confused and panicked, Bong Hwan thought of summoning So-young's spirit to return to her body. He asked Choi if she knew any shaman experts nearby. Choi remembered that the only one with that kind of power was Queen Dowager Jo. Soon after So-young's visit to Queen Dowager Jo's place, which was filled with candles, amulets, and had a mystical feel, made Queen Dowager Jo uncomfortable. Maybe So-young came because she suspected that Queen Dowager Jo had once used amulets to cast black magic on her. In reality, Soyoung was there to ask for help with a spirit summoning ritual. Queen Dowager Jo denied knowing anything about it and said she didn't believe in such things. When Soyoung glanced at the amulets on the pillars, Queen Dowager Jo quickly signaled her maid to remove them. In the end, Soyoung's attempt to use shamanism failed because Queen Dowager Jo refused to help. As Bong Hwan walked away, he wondered why Soyoung's soul hadn't tried to return to her body. Was it because she felt trapped as a queen, or because of a broken heart? Bong Hwan then imagined that maybe Soyoung, who had always been stiff and never dated, was now flirting with men in the modern world using Bong Hwan's body. Now, Soyoung's mental state was worsening, and she became even more stressed. She screamed and ranted at the lake. And Bong Hwan, frustrated, threatened that if Soyoung didn't come back to her body, he would harm Soyoung's body with a hairpin. At the same time, Choi, noticing the queen's strange behavior, could only watch in exhaustion. She wondered if the queen was acting this way because she had been scolded too often. Meanwhile, since he couldn't get help from Queen Dowager Jo, Bong Hwan, desperate, decided to try a spirit summoning ritual on his own, but it didn't work. Later, Hong Yun brought a book as a gift from the king, but Bong Hwan refused to accept it. On that day, Cheoljong officially appointed Byong-in as the Chief Minister of Justice. There, Cheoljong asked why Byong-in, who had previously refused any government position, now wanted the job. With a look of determination, Byong-in said that he wanted to restore order to the country, especially with the internal crisis going on. Cheoljong then received the petition to impeach Soyoung. He was surprised but, for the first time, firmly decided to reject the petition, saying it wasn't signed properly. This unexpected show of firmness from Cheoljong shocked everyone present in the hall. Meanwhile, Bong Hwan, still holding a grudge against Soyoung, thought about misusing her body. Hong Yun encouraged Soyoung not to lose hope, saying that even if she had lost her memory, she still needed to take care of her health. Hong Yun believed the queen was stressed because of memory loss, though that wasn't true. Hearing this, Bong Hwan's spirits began to lift again. While they were relaxing, Byong-in showed up, followed by Cheoljong. In front of Soyoung, Byong-in blamed Cheoljong for causing Soyoung to want to end her life. Cheoljong denied this, leading to a heated argument between the two men. And Bong Hwan, tired of being defended by both men, interrupted them. After Byong-in left, Cheoljong knelt in front of Bong Hwan and handed back the hairpin he had left on the stone. Cheoljong then asked for a chance to understand Soyoung better. This gesture left Bong Hwan surprised, but he accepted Cheoljong's sincere request. Meanwhile, the Queen Dowager blamed Soyoung's strange behavior for all the bad rumors spreading about her, which were being used by the Punjiang-jo clan. Bong Hwan confidently told the Queen Dowager that if she supported him, he would clear up all the gossip and rumors. Bong Hwan then gathered a group of young, strong, and handsome men to carry the food trays. Using the power of influencers, Bong Hwan aimed to counter the bad gossip about Soyoung. These men didn't just serve food, they also spread positive rumors about Soyoung. Soon, the whole palace was buzzing with talk that it was Wajen who had tried to push the queen into the lake. However, because Soyoung defended her by claiming she had tried to take her own life, Wajen wasn't punished. This made Wajen look bad, while Soyoung was seen as a kind-hearted and noble person. And Wajen, learning about this, went to meet Cheoljong. Before she could speak, Cheoljong asked for her father's support to reject the petition to remove Soyoung as queen. Wajen agreed but made a hidden request which she wanted to invite Cheoljong to spend the night with her, as he hadn't visited her since she became a concubine. Cheoljong promised to visit her that evening. After meeting Cheoljong, Wajen went to see Soyoung. Soyoung welcomed her into the room, thinking Wajen would be kind since Soyoung had defended her. But instead, Wajen gave Bong Hwan a cold look. The gossip had caused tension between them. Wajen said that even though she felt grateful for Soyoung's help, she would now ask her father not to support the petition to impeach Queen Soyoung. Not long after, Wajen asked if Soyoung would lie again just to get the king's attention, like she had in the past when she lost him because of lies. Bong Hwan firmly replied that he had no interest in the king at all. Wajen then revealed her plan to spend the night with the king. Bong Hwan was shocked, not because of the king, but because of Wajen herself, leaving him heartbroken. However, Wajen assumed that So-young was upset because of the king. At a brothel, Byung-in met with a minister from the Punjiang-jo clan who was pushing for So-young's impeachment. There, Byung-in showed him a letter proving that Wajen had worked with Queen Dowager Jo to get rid of So-young. It was actually a fake letter created by Kim Jwa Geun. Using this letter as a threat, Byung-in demanded the Punjiang-jo clan withdraw the impeachment petition. If they refused, Byung-in would reveal the letter and ruin the reputations of Wajen, Queen Dowager Jo, and the Punjiang-jo clan. The minister had no choice but to agree. That night, Wajen asked young Pyong to deliver a letter to her father, asking him not to support the petition to impeach So-young. However, young Pyong hesitated, wanting to discuss the matter with Cheoljong first, as he believed the impeachment could weaken the Anon Kim clan. Reluctantly, young Pyong took the letter. After he left, Wajen prepared to meet Cheoljong. Meanwhile, young Pyong met with Cheoljong, who was on his way to visit Wajen. Young Pyong suggested not canceling the impeachment of the queen, but Cheoljong remained firm, saying that if So-young was removed, the next queen would still come from the Anon Kim clan. Plus, So-young had defended Wajen. Young Pyong warned Cheoljong not to waver and reminded him that if the queen turned out to be an enemy, Cheoljong must deal with her with his own hands. Meanwhile, at Queen Dowager Jo's residence, a shaman arrived to perform a ritual on So-young, who was in the kitchen at the time. Bong Hwan, inside So-young's body, spent his time sewing banners. It turns out, Bong Hwan had plans to start a food business in the palace. After living in that time for so long, he was starting to enjoy it. He was determined to bring modern ideas to the past and become the first person in Korea to invent something. In Queen Dowager Jo's hall, the shaman performing the ritual said that the queen's body had been taken over by an evil spirit. At the same moment, Bong Hwan, who was excited about the idea of inventing air conditioning in Korea, suddenly fainted. It turned out that in the modern world, Bong Hwan's real body was in a coma at the hospital. Someone was removing his oxygen mask, putting his life in danger. Back in the kitchen, everyone panicked when So-young fainted. The royal chef checked on her and announced that the queen had stopped breathing. It was all caused by Han, who was jealous and had bad intentions. He removed Bong Hwan's oxygen mask, causing his body's vital signs to drop. Soon after, doctors and nurses rushed to save Bong Hwan, and miraculously, his soul returned to his real body. However, Bong Hwan was diagnosed in a vegetative state which he appeared unconscious, but could still open his eyes, hear, and move a little. Two police detectives who were planning to arrest Bong Hwan visited him in the hospital. They talked in front of his body, saying that Chef Bong Hwan had been framed and was caught in the middle of a fight between Han and the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, when the queen fainted and fell into a coma, the king canceled his visit to Wajen's hall. He ran as fast as he could to see the queen, who was lying unconscious. Everyone was guessing what had caused her to faint. The doctor who examined her said the queen was in a vegetative state, similar to Bong Hwan's condition. However, the difference was that Bong Hwan could blink, while the queen's eyes stayed closed. The king panicked when the healer said the queen might die. Desperate, he carried the queen to the village hall. The healer inserted acupuncture needles into the queen's head, and suddenly, the queen sat up and angrily cursed at the healer. For a moment, Bong Hwan's soul had returned to So-young's body. He was shocked when he saw the king there, and then fainted again. The healer warned that tonight would be critical for the queen. The king decided to stay by So-young's side, regretting how poorly he had treated her and hoping for a chance to make things right. Later, the king heard So-young mumbling in her sleep. Meanwhile, in her hall, Wajen, who had been dressed beautifully, had to deal with disappointment when she learned the king had canceled his visit because the queen had fainted. Furious, Wajen thought this was just an excuse from the queen, knowing the king was supposed to stay with her that night. Upset that her plan to spend the night with the king had failed, Wajen went to Queen Dowager Jo, who was preparing a ritual. There, Wajen asked Queen Dowager Jo for help in defeating Queen So-young. Meanwhile, at Queen Dowager Jo's residence, a fortune teller suggested placing unlucky items in the Dojongjeon Hall to prepare for a ritual to remove evil spirits from the queen's body. With Queen Dowager Jo's approval, the fortune teller went under the hall and planted amulets. At the same time, A spy maid was tasked with taking So-young's belongings to make the ritual stronger. She successfully took a piece of So-young's cloth and gave it to Han, Queen Dowager Jo's trusted maid. Elsewhere, Byong-in, who was determined to find out who attacked So-young, began to uncover new clues. He called a eunuch who once saw young Pyong burning Cheoljong's clothes to cover his tracks. The eunuch testified that Cheoljong had taken a piece of the burned cloth, which matched the one Byong-in had. Confident, Byong-in suspected that young Pyong was involved in the attack on So-young, with Cheoljong's help. Meanwhile, Jwa Geun informed the Grand Empress Dowager that Queen Dowager Jo was performing rituals on So-young, a report he likely received from the spy maid. At the same time, Cheoljong's eunuch reported that the queen had fainted, possibly from accidentally drinking poison. The Grand Empress Dowager and Jwa Geun immediately asked for help from the Department of Justice, led by Byong-in, to investigate Queen Dowager Jo's residence, where she was performing a ritual, and to check the royal kitchen. During the investigation, Byong-in's team found type A poison in the kitchen. High-ranking officials of the Anon Kim clan raided Queen Dowager Jo's residence, leaving Han and the fortune teller in shock. At that time, the Grand Empress Dowager accused Queen Dowager Jo of using magic on Queen So-young, putting her life in danger. Queen Dowager Jo asked about the queen's condition. The Grand Empress Dowager explained that So-young had been poisoned, and type A poison was found in the kitchen, a place where the queen often spent time. Hearing this, Queen Dowager Jo was stunned, as it reminded her of the late king, who also died from poisoning. Recalling the past, Queen Dowager Jo reminded everyone that the former king died in the same way. Then, the Grand Empress Dowager pointed out that Queen Dowager Jo had always blamed her for the late king's death. In reality, Queen Dowager Jo had sacrificed her own child to save herself back then. And now, she was using amulets buried under the Dongjong Hall. As punishment, the Grand Empress Dowager sentenced the fortune teller and Han to death. Shocked by the punishment of her partners, Queen Dowager Jo begged for mercy. She then told the Grand Empress Dowager that she should be confident that Cheoljong was under her control, just like she had controlled the late king. It seems there is an untold secret between the two queen mothers. Remembering Queen Dowager Jo's words about Cheoljong hiding something, the Grand Empress Dowager became uneasy. Soon after, Byong-in offered to check on Cheoljong. He went to Cheoljong, who was with So-young, and informed him that Queen Dowager Jo and Wajen had performed a ritual on the queen. He also mentioned that snake poison was found in the kitchen, where the queen had been staying. Byong-in added that he would now guard the queen and investigate the attack on her from their second wedding night. However, Cheoljong refused. His true nature started to show. He wasn't as weak as people thought. Cheoljong ordered Byong-in to leave and made it clear that So-young was his woman. He then decided to move the queen to her parents' house that night for her safety. Later, in his room, Cheoljong, young Pyong, and Hong discussed Byong-in's determination to uncover the case of the queen's attack, which involved the three of them. It became clear that Cheoljong and his friends were secretly preparing a special force to defend him in the future. After the meeting, Cheoljong visited Wajen and told her to keep her distance from Queen Dowager Jo because Queen Dowager Jo had been accused of poisoning Queen So-young. Cheoljong also hinted at why they couldn't be together. Meanwhile, the Grand Empress Dowager discussed the queen's situation with Jwa Geun. She was worried that if this continued, Wajen might give birth to a prince first. However, Jwa Geun had already prepared a backup plan cause he had someone from the Anon Kim clan ready to replace Queen So-young if she didn't recover. It was also revealed that Jwa Geun had chosen Cheoljong to be king, and if Cheoljong ever went against the Anon Kim clan, the Grand Empress Dowager could easily remove him from the throne. Later, the queen finally woke up, but it was still Bonghwan's soul in her body. Bonghwan was shocked to find himself in a dazzling place filled with gold-themed decorations. At first, he thought he had been sent to the Joseon-era, but when he saw Hong Yun, he relaxed, realizing he was still in the Joseon-era. Hong Yun explained that the queen was now in her own home. Bonghwan was startled because that meant he would meet So-young's real father, Kim Moon-gun. Feeling awkward, Bonghwan thought about how, in modern times, the father of any girl was his biggest challenge, and now he had to deal with Kim Moon-gun, So-young's father. At that time, Kim Moon-goon greeted So-young with happiness and brought the best healers to check on her. He even prepared a royal salon, which almost scared Bong-hwan. But after some convincing, Bong-hwan agreed to get dressed up. Strange things started happening. Suddenly, memories of the real So-young appeared, and Bong-hwan discovered that So-young's birthday was the same day as her mother's death anniversary. This meant that So-young never celebrated her birthday with happiness. Hong-yun was just as surprised as Bong-hwan to find that the queen's memories had returned, especially since Bong-hwan could now connect with So-young's memories. Meanwhile, Cheoljong and his friends secretly practiced martial arts in the forest. Hong was assigned to train his soldiers in archery. It seemed that Cheoljong's hidden secret army was finally starting to take action. To cover up his activities, Cheoljong pretended that he had just returned from a hunting trip. On his way back, Cheoljong received news from Jwa Geun that Queen So-young had regained consciousness. Cheoljong then headed to Kim Moon-goon's residence. While visiting the queen, Cheoljong had a bigger goal, which to find a ledger that was rumored to be kept by his father-in-law. On his way, a bouquet of flowers suddenly floated toward him. It turned out that the flowers belonged to a woman who had been given them by her boyfriend. Whether out of embarrassment or some other reason, the woman pushed the flowers away, and they ended up in front of the king. Shortly after, Cheoljong picked up the flowers, thinking they would make a good gift to bring to the queen. Elsewhere, Wajen was looking at a children's storybook where she had replaced the original owner's name with her own. Young Pyong arrived and informed her that Cheoljong had gone to visit the queen's family. Feeling jealous, Wajen decided to follow him, filled with suspicion. At the justice office, Byung-in ordered his men to guard the person who had sold type A poison to Han, which was found in the kitchen and suspected of causing Queen So-young to faint. Meanwhile, Queen Dowager Jo visited Minister Jo's house and asked for the royal hairpin and another item to be prepared. Minister Jo was surprised, wondering if Queen Dowager Jo planned to give these items to Queen So-young, since only a queen could own that hairpin. Elsewhere, Jwa Geun instructed the eunuch to find a very important item hidden in Kim Moon-goon's safe, and it was something that was never supposed to exist. At the same time, Bong-hwan started gaining access to So-young's memories and skills. He suddenly became an expert at playing the lute, leaving him confused. To make matters worse, Bong-hwan's usual voice disappeared, replaced by So-young's soft, female voice, which shocked him. Stressed out, Bong-hwan played seesaw, and in his frustration, he jumped really high. With a mischievous grin, Bong-hwan began plotting revenge against Secretary Han by destroying his family in the present and preventing his ancestors from ever being born. Bong-hwan also started thinking of ways to gain power in this era. Soon after, Hong-yun gave Bong-hwan a surprising answer that the only way to make the Grand Empress Dowager happy was for the queen to give birth to a prince. However, Bong-hwan thought this was a bad idea. Instead, using So-young's memories, Bong-hwan discovered a secret treasure vault belonging to her father. Inside was a chest filled with valuable metals, highly prized by the palace women. With this treasure, Bong-hwan decided to return to the palace, planning to bribe the Grand Empress Dowager to gain more power. While Bong-hwan was daydreaming about becoming a powerful queen, Cheoljong arrived, holding a bouquet of flowers. Seeing how handsome Cheoljong looked, So-young's memories suddenly took over Bong-hwan. So-young's memory of her inauguration as queen, which was very special to her, made Bong-hwan realize he was losing control to her memories. To snap out of it, he quickly smelled the flowers Cheoljong brought. Pretending he wanted to learn more about where So-young grew up, Cheoljong asked to be shown around Kim Moon-goon's home. Bong-hwan reluctantly agreed to accompany him. As they walked together, Cheoljong, who had started becoming more interested in So-young, asked if he could get to know her better. However, Bong-hwan coldly refused. At his in-laws' house, Cheoljong carefully observed everything, each person, room, and the surroundings. He was led to a room filled with valuables, where he found Kim Moon-goon's safe, which he planned to check later that night. While outside, Cheoljong's attention was drawn to an old well. It brought back memories when he was a child. He had been trapped in that well with a book. Suddenly, Cheoljong had trouble breathing, and flashes of his past, similar to his dreams, came back to him. And Bong-hwan, confused, felt So-young's memories rushing in. He imagined the damp smell of the well and saw a vision of young Cheoljong and himself fighting. He also saw a crying young So-young, blaming herself for someone's death involving the teenage Byong-in. As they were lost in these memories, Wajen arrived and called for the king. Bong-hwan realized that Wajen wasn't as innocent as he once thought. Then, a flash of So-young's memories made Bong-hwan suddenly dislike Wajen. He recalled that Wajen had once pretended to be So-young. Still, out of compassion, Bong-hwan advised Wajen to be honest with Cheoljong, but Wajen rudely refused and walked away. While calming down outside, Bong-hwan looked at Cheoljong with sympathy. From history lessons in school, Bong-hwan knew about King Cheoljong's tragic past. Cheoljong's grandfather was executed in exile after being accused of treason. His father lived in exile with him and eventually died as well. Turns out, Cheoljong's grandmother, aunt, and half-brother were also killed due to betrayal. Knowing all of this, Bong-hwan felt pity for Cheoljong. Cheoljong, who had started to change his view of the queen, asked So-young not to become his enemy in the future. That night in the palace, Wajen, while looking at the lake, was visited by Queen Dowager Jo, who gave her a royal hairpin. Receiving the hairpin, something only a queen should have, Wajen became ambitious to try and become the real queen. She then told Queen Dowager Jo a big secret between her and So-young. Meanwhile, the spy maid was on night patrol when she suddenly found Oh-wool's hanger lying on the ground. Back at So-young's house, a eunuch disguised in a Justice Department uniform successfully sneaked into the house. His mission was to steal the ledger from Kim Moon-gun's safe. Meanwhile, Cheoljong woke up from his drunken state and decided to sneak out with the same goal, which to find the ledger. But as he was searching, he ran into a eunuch and a fight broke out right outside Bong-hwan's room. And Bong-hwan, half awake, thought he saw two people dancing, but when a knife struck the wall, he realized they were fighting. Wanting to help, Bong-hwan, still groggy, ended up accidentally hitting Cheoljong with a large jar, allowing the eunuch to escape. The noise caused Byong-in, who was on guard, to rush over. Knowing the chaos could have serious consequences, Cheoljong quickly pulled So-young close and kissed her passionately, just as Byong-in arrived. This was definitely not what Byong-in wanted to see. After things settled and So-young fell back asleep, Cheoljong continued his search for the ledger, but Kim Moon-gun had already moved it. Then, Cheoljong remembered how strange Kim Moon-gun had acted earlier when near the well. Suspecting something, Cheoljong checked the well and found the book hidden there. Just as he was about to take it, a worker passed by, and Cheoljong had to abandon his mission for the night. Soon after, Cheoljong returned to So-young's room, thinking about the person he had fought, who was disguised in a Justice Department uniform. He began to suspect that this person had been sent by Byong-in. This is the end of part 2. The moral lesson from this series is if you're stuck in someone else's body, might as well make the best of it and cook something delicious.